taxes, inflation, and the breakdown of the family are causing us to fall behind. We have the lowest net worth in the United States, and I'm sure those numbers cross the border as well.
Some people get the disability tax credit and they don't open the registered disability savings plan, and that's where the government puts in all the money of grants and bonds for a person with a disability who has done all the steps. Some people don't do all the steps.
Good morning. What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show, the home of Epic Conversations, and I'm the host of Epic Conversations. 2018 Innovation Award winner, 2020 Best Podcast News Award winner given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. I also co-host and co-produce the only online show in the world for dads and fathers that's sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care, and being part of that team since 2020. We've reached out directly and indirectly to over 400,000 dads, fathers, and male caregivers around the world. And as always, I like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. Ryan Knight's here on a Friday. Check it out.
Yes. Shout out. Thank you to my wife, Cher. She's home today, so able to walk the kiddos, and I can hop on so I can be with you.
Well, no, with everybody, with not just with me, with the world, buddy. With the world, not just me, me.
But for those that may tune in only on Fridays and don't remember who I am, my name is Ryan Knight, one of the co-founders of the Afro-Caribbean Business Network. So we work with entrepreneurs of African and Caribbean heritage, really to figure out what stage their business is in, then help them to create a strategy to grow their companies exponentially. And I am an entrepreneur myself. I run a company called Detailing Nights. So we provide mobile waterless car cleaning. So we go to people's houses or their offices, clean their cars on the spot without using water, and are plant-based, eco-friendly.
And speaking, because it's never about me, we also have another special guest. Well, not but another special guest here. Look who showed up.
Hey, yes, sir.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. It is Roger Dundas of BuyVibes.com. How are you, sir?
I am doing well. Can't complain.
Good. And
the power panel in October. Happy Small Business Month.
So I think that is a good segue. Oh, well, we'll get to that in a second. Cindy Ann Williams says it was an honor and a pleasure to work for the Black Opportunity Fund.
Yes.
All right. So that puts into a nice segue. Ray, I was elated a few weeks ago when I saw on your timeline in LinkedIn that now you have a role with the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation. How did that come about? And why did you take on that another responsibility?
He's not retired.
So let me tell you, it's kind of interesting. I think most people who have known me probably know I'm in finance, but probably have absolutely no idea what I do in finance. In fact, there's also a lot of people who don't know I'm in finance and think I'm actually in food because they see me posting about restaurants and wine and food more so. The last business I built at National Bank was, in fact, a mortgage securitization business that I started by myself in 2008, did my first trade in 2009, and it is actually now one of the businesses inside Banque Nationale and financial markets that, is extremely profitable. A lot of the business was undertaken through CMHC with their Canada Mortgage Bond Program. So basically what I was doing in my work was, let's say someone gets a mortgage, right, from a mortgage broker. That mortgage broker is getting that financing from a trust company or a bank or a credit union. Those mortgages are then taken and they're securitized, right? And what you're doing, you basically securitize in the cash flows. Like, if you have a mortgage, you're paying on a monthly basis. Mm-hmm. So those cash flows, I'm securitizing them, we're putting them into a note, right? And that note, securitized note, is then sold to the Canada Housing Trust, which in turn allows the Canada CMHC to issue a Canada Mortgage Bond. The bond is purchased by investors. The investors, the funds that comes in, the proceeds, then floats back to those people who had entered the mortgages in the first place. You rinse and repeat. So we built a business from that. That is one of the most powerful and one of the most revenue driven within National Bank. So over the years, that allowed me to not only understand the housing ecosystem, but also the frailties of it, the challenges of it. Got to see a whole bunch of stuff, because now I'm talking about everyone within the system. A better understanding of the builders, a better understanding of the financiers, a better understanding of who's doing community housing, a better understanding from the credit union system about where they're focusing, just all around. So if you were to look at Equitable, First National, Home Capital, I know all of those because they're all my clients. If you look at the credit union system, coast to coast, I know the majority of them because they're all my clients, right? So this is stuff that people may not be aware of. And so that allowed me engagement with CMHC within the insurance arm, because insurance, especially in high ratio mortgages, is very important. Insurance, as it speaks to certificate of insurance for commercial and multis, very important, CMHC again. That allowed me to do also engagement with CMHC in their treasury, because it's the treasury that issued the bonds, and the opportunity to hedge the bonds. Again, I am a derivative specialist. Things I don't ordinarily talk about, because like, who wants to know what the hell a derivative specialist does, right? So that's, I prefer to talk about food, travel, wine, etc.
That last 2 minutes, we need to clip that.
Yeah.
Because the masterclass that just got dropped.
Yeah, I was
In
thinking
2
the
minutes?
same thing.
But you were asking, you're literally asking, how it is that I got to CMHC. Well, guess what? I have a ton of experience in housing, and I was also the person at National Bank as a vice chair trying to articulate the bank's position on housing affordability.
Wow.
So that meant I was engaged with people in sustainability, something else that I've got something of a background in, because I got my qualifications from Cambridge University a couple of years ago on sustainability leadership. So there's a whole bunch of things that come together that represents why it was that I was actually a first-rate candidate. In fact, when you go through the skills matrix at CMHC, and some of it is posted on their website, you will see there's only one person in the category of real estate financing, and that will be me. But then I also hit a number of the other boxes. That's just a reflection of the experience I bring to the table and why I was deemed a very good candidate. And so now I sit as a board member. I'm also happens to be the chair of the pension trustee, because I've got some very good experience in pension investment management, from sitting on the boards of CPA Canada, sitting on the board of United Way of Canada, and so on and so forth in pension investment management. Okay. Plus my overall background in finance means that I have a good understanding of the wider financial markets, with deep understanding in certain areas as it speaks to asset classes, foreign exchange, money markets, equity, commodities, and derivatives, for probably all of them. So to answer to your question, it's like, I've got the experience.
Can I quickly just thank two people right now? I would like to thank you, Dr. Vibe, for asking that question, because, and hold on, I want to do the second thing. I want to thank you, Ray, for, you're usually very humble, but there's times when you need to let people know what you're capable of. And so thank you for just putting the humbleness aside for a second and letting us know your experience, because it is stuff that we actually don't know. We hear and see titles and see keynotes and we see presentations, but hearing about your actual background and what the experience that you have to bring to the table of something like this, I just want to thank you for letting us know that why you're experienced and why you're chosen. Because and again, that whole DEI stuff where people don't realize we get into positions because we are excellent. People need to be reminded of our capabilities and not just get put labels on stuff. So I want to thank you, gentlemen.
Don't be fooled by the hoodie. In other words,
right?
This is not just a hoodie. This is a George Brown hoodie. Let me tell you.
I'm telling you, yo.
So Ray, did you approach them or did they approach you?
So I got approached from a bunch of different places within government by an MP and by some other folks. I was asked, could you please provide us with, a bio? And I'm like, sure. In fact, I was also approached by a headhunter who wanted to know if there was a job at the time as CEO of CMHC, and I'm like, no thanks.
Right, that'd be heavy, right?
That's not something I even want to think about. Look, it's a Crown Corp. Part of the reason I was happy to undertake this, and this is not a paid gig, but it's an important one because housing and housing affordability has such damaging aspects on Black communities, right? In terms of our lack of ownership, that for me, it's important that a voice be around the table that actually is able to speak loudly to some of these issues, right? I'm not saying just because I'm around the table, it's going to change, but at the very least, being around the table means I can actually make very clear statements and I can bring to the table information I'm hearing from community and from other folks as it speaks to how do we address this huge and ugly issue within our society.
Got some comments here before you jump in. Hayden Morrison says, Roger, that's a great point. Our community sharing board members. We should figure out how to do that. Mignon Ken says the Ontario Disability Support Program shelter calculation is $582 a month. Make that sense in today's housing market. She also says, I'm a George Brown alumni. And the Macmillan Group says, great point, Ryan. The Caribbean ingrained humility has to be, quote, unlearned, unquote. So, Ray, what are some of the challenges you've heard about what we face as African Canadians, Black Canadians, when it comes to housing? What are you hearing, and what are you able to speak to that board?
So, look, home ownership rate in Canada is probably in the mid-high 70%. Home ownership rates in Canada, okay? Black Canadians is probably in the low 40s.
Gotcha.
Okay? So think of that for a moment. Back in, I think it was 2022, I think it was RBC. They had this paper. It was called Unleashing Opportunity, and it talked about the racial wealth gap, but it spoke specifically about housing. And what it spoke to was that if Black communities in Canada owned property on a pro rata basis to the size of our representation in the population, during COVID alone, we would have been $100 billion richer. Sit in that for a moment and understand where that number comes from. As I mentioned to you, home ownership in Canada is in the high 70s, but for Black communities, it's in the low 40s. That represents that differential of $100 billion. That's just during COVID, because everyone wanted a house and prices went up stupid and all of that good business, right? So that alone speaks to so much. Let me tell you how. Let's unfold that a little bit. If you had purchased a house, let's say 20 years ago, 25 years ago, for let's say $250,000, right? 25 years later, full well that place is now worth 1.2, 1.3. But let's just say it's worth $1 million. Okay. Over that 25 years, you're probably close to paying off your mortgage. But that $250 that you've paid off is now worth $1 million. Off that, let's assume you go to the bank for that loan equity that you have in your property, right? And you want to borrow against it. But they say, we're only going to do 50% loan to value. That's $500,000 you have right there. Think about how you can leverage that $500,000.
Mhm.
Think about that for a moment in terms of generating wealth, whether it means going and investing in another income property, use it in the equity markets, the stock markets, maybe going out and buying a boat because that's what you wanted. But all I'm speaking to is the lost leverage that Black communities do not see, right? The other component there is, lo and behold, you right away have a situation, right, where you have the opportunity to now provide financial access to your children, right? Whether it's because you want to pay for them to undertake higher education, or you want to become the bank of mom and dad, right? Because that down payment situation, is not an easy one. And this is where mom and dad comes in. It's like, there you go, son, 200,000 towards your $1 million house, or 100,000 to your $500,000 condo apartment, or whatever it might be. We don't, because of the low rates of home ownership by Black communities, we don't get to see as much of that in terms of giving our kids access, right? And so we need to change some of that. And Black Opportunity Fund hopes to change some of that with our housing fund, because it's going to be looking at how do we engage with helping on a co-ownership basis the down payment that's required, right? Unless you're taking a high ratio mortgage, then your down payment is 20%. Well, 20%, that takes a lot of time on a 500, even a 500,000,
Exactly.
exactly, to actually come to.
Yes.
So if you do high ratio, 10%, you come up with 5% and we come up with 5%. We have, co-equity, co-ownership within that. We have the opportunity now to help someone get onto the housing ladder, because that's the biggest gap, right? That down payment gap. That's the biggest gap. That's the biggest challenge. Think about it for a moment. The majority of people who might check all the boxes in an application for a mortgage without the down payment, those people are probably paying rent not dissimilar to a mortgage, right? If you're in a good job, exactly, right? If you're in a good job, consistent, your credit scores are great, you can manage GDS, TDS, you just don't have that down payment, right? So we're looking to see where we can actually support and fill the gap. And we believe that is one of those areas. We believe, Ryan, when you talk about the sort of big plan up ahead, this is part and parcel of how we want to create change. And this is why we are not like the regular charities. This is why we're also called the Black Opportunity Fund. Even though we're not a fund per se, what we're setting up right now at arm's length will help us achieve some of these goals for Black communities in terms of access.
All right, I want to jump in with some comments. Earl Anderson says, wonderful conversation. Sarita Powell says, happy I came across this live. The McMillan Group says 37% Black home ownership rate, and he would know. He has been doing private mortgage stuff since 1999. And I'm going to see if you have time. I would love you and him to meet, because that would be a dangerous conversation I'd like to be part of. But he also has a question. He says, Ray, I would like you to define for our audience the difference between housing affordability and low-income housing, as the two are often confused, in my opinion.
Yeah. So there is a whole spectrum that represents housing, right? Housing affordability is a nomenclature that is probably misleading. And I say that because what represents housing affordability in Montreal does not represent housing affordability in Toronto, right? There is no housing market in Canada, first of all. There are housing markets. They are, territorial from that perspective. So you'd probably want to compare the housing market in Toronto and Vancouver. It's probably closer to do a comparison with New York, right? And San Fran, rather than anywhere else in Canada, to be quite frank. And when you talk about affordable housing, what's affordable for a First Nations community in rural Ontario is not going to be the same. So that's the first piece. The spectrum I talk about, you have everything from what might be deemed social housing. No, actually, you probably start at transitional housing. Then you have social housing, maybe thereafter. Then you have the stuff that represents subsidized rent. Then you have market rent. Then you have ownerships of different types of levels. So it is this wide spectrum of different shelter, if you will. And so it becomes quite not troubling, but certainly challenging around defining very specifically. You literally have to look at, which part of town or which part of Canada that you're talking about to define, for instance, what affordability looks like. Because affordability could also look like, man, the starting point is 750,000 above. That's where it happens to be because of the nature of that specific market. You look at Toronto, right? What's the average house price in the GTA area? It's going to be very different to, what the average price is in Regina. And so what affordability looks like there is very different to what affordability looks like here.
Gotcha. And I wanted to get your guidance on, so with our organization, we've engaged with CMHC in the past to work on some projects, and I always feel like we hit some sort of wall.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is, do we just need to get better when dealing with an entity like CMHC, or are there better ways to engage this entity so that we can actually break through and get a project to the finish line?
So I think you just need to literally engage better. So understand exactly what they're looking for. One of the big problems I see with CMHC is that there's a ton of programs that they have, but quite often, if you don't hit every single criteria, it's like, oh, well, that doesn't quite fit. And quite often you have something that actually will be reflective of 70% of the criteria here, 30% of the criteria there. To me, those things in terms of the program offerings should be stacked so that, you can actually get completion. Look, CMHC is a Crown Corp, and its traditional operating approach, I think, is somewhat stymied. It's sort of like very, very compartmentalized. And so I think what Minister Sean Fraser is trying to do now is create greater flexibility under the under his particular ministry and portfolio for CMHC. So I'm very hopeful that with a new CEO, a new board, and the desire of government for the first time in a very, very long time to address affordability, to address housing needs, and address shelter more generally, that we're going to see additional changes taking place, right? That's my takeaway. That's my understanding. And that's hopefully what we'll be pushing for on an ongoing basis.
All right, we got some questions here. Sarita Powell says, are there supports for the Black community towards home ownership?
Well, I just mentioned the fact that we are about to launch a housing fund. So I would say that might represent something along those lines. I cannot speak for other organizations, but having said that, the likes of Habitat for Humanity in what they're building, they will have, and they've come to us as a partner in the past to share that they have a home that's ready for a Black family because they set aside a certain amount of their bills for that specific purpose, right? So there's that. The other piece is that there is a lot of lending, such as I think the MLI Select programs from CMHC, where, and again, we come back to the notion of affordability, where if you use that loan fund, then lo and behold, you have to build, as a builder, you have to set aside something like, I think it's 20 to 25, maybe 30% of affordable units. So you have market units as the 70%, then 30% set aside. Now, I don't know necessarily that 30% is set aside specifically for Black communities, but it's set aside as affordable. Then you have people like Daniels Corp or Dream, where they actually do focus on helping Black communities access, affordable housing. So there's a bunch of different things out there that represents what it might look like. And I think the problem is, up until last year, when the new minister, essentially came out with a number of announcements around housing. Prior to that, you really had to be reliant on what's going on at the provincial level and what's going on at the municipal level. But now we've got the feds back in the game. I think, opportunity for changes, and the very fact that the federal government is actively engaging at both the provincial and municipal level goes an awfully long way to saying, I'm not going to suggest to you that, that suddenly it's going to be solved, but there are solutions slowly coming through. And there is no one solution, by the way, right? The solutions have to come from a wide variety of places and spaces, whether it be community housing, more focused housing, modular builds. There's just a whole bunch of things, building for just rental, because that's also part of the whole spectrum of shelter.
Gotcha.
Got another question here. I think you can answer this one quickly. Will the fund be set up to support Black communities across Canada or just the GTA?
We intend, well, first of all, Black Opportunity Fund is a national organization, and that is reflected very much if you were to look at our board and see where the representation comes from. And so as a national organization, we're always looking to undertake everything from a national perspective. We anticipate we'll be in the 6 major housing markets across Canada.
Okay. Next question. The Macmillan Group has 2, and he's right in on this. Has there been any consideration to use land trusts in Canadian cities to deal with the issue of Black home ownership? And do see it as a valuable option?
So I think it is a viable option. I mean, Ray might be aware that recently the federal government actually announced a bunch of different sites, and probably more to be released, that speaks to you come together with an appropriate plan. Then, you have the opportunity to take either land or building on a 99-year lease for $1 and then use that for the purposes of building. So really, the problem here, though, is that there aren't too many Black builders out there. I know of a few. One of the interestingly prominent one is Golden Triangle Developments, 2 young brothers out of the East End who are building 80 and 90 unit situations. And in fact, they were doing it and actually setting aside 30% of their units for, affordability for Black families, right? I mean, so if you look up gold, let me just make sure I've not misstated.
Yeah,
but
that's true. I'm gonna reach out to them and get them on the show.
Yeah. So I mean, 2 bright young brothers. Great story about them when they were, I think, at McMaster, clubbing together to buy their first property, flipping it, and then since then they are amazing Black men, young entrepreneurs that enough respect for. It's like, and they are successful and they've got a whole bunch of stuff going on. So we want to work with them. They had some struggles as it spoke to accessing. When I told them about CMHC and what they were doing and how it aligned, we went through with them in CMHC, but we didn't get anywhere. So I really do understand when Ryan talks about, some of the challenges and struggles of getting stuff across the line. There are obstacles in there that needs to be worked through.
Got it. Next question from Ray again says, if we use fractional ownership as one of the solutions to deal with affordability, would the liability mortgage be reported only for the debt that is proportionate to the percentage ownership?
Great question.
So I do not know the legal ramifications well enough. The question actually sort of answers itself in so much that would make sense, but I don't know the actual law well enough to make a specific statement on that. I think what I do know is that from our perspective, what we'll be signing is essentially a document that reflects our co-ownership on that down payment, with a clear understanding within the documentation that when the property is sold, that we will have a takeout on a proportional basis.
it. And Dr. Chachi said to Ray, excellent question. And FHH Enterprise says to the McMillan Group, mortgages and real estate, this is a strategy we should explore. There are ways to raise capital. We must think innovatively to solve problems. Absolutely. This is good. I know, Roger, you got to get off in the next few minutes. Do you have any questions or any comments?
Yeah. You know, the thing about the housing or any investment is the importance that people put on that as a wealth building tool. And what I think Dr. Vibe has spoken about a lot of times is that people focus a lot on the show, right? So they focus on things that are not really income earning, and spend their money on entertainment and having a great time without thinking about the future. And I think that's a challenge. And I see communities. I see recently where I live, there's been an influx of South Asian families, and I would say in every house there's a multi-generation. So there's the parents, maybe a brother or sister, two different families in the one unit. And I find that a lot of Black families, they're not into that. They don't want to share space. They don't want to come together and do that group buying. I don't know if that's what Ray McMillan was alluding to with respect to fractional ownership, where there are multiple people actually not just buying but living in the same space to reduce the burden of the high cost of the housing, and figuring out a way to work it out. Let's just work it out. Let's try and get along, right? Rather than fighting and say, "Oh, I just want this space for myself." And I think that's one of the ways that could really speed up this thing, to buy and live together as a family.
Well put. Well put. And do you want to add to that comment, Ray?
Not really. I mean, at the end of the day, I think when I look, I see certain communities that's a sort of a natural aspect of how they live their lives. Culturally, very comfortable. And I think, my observation is that I've seen that with both Indian and with Chinese families. I think more traditionally in the Caribbean, you might see that with Black families, maybe less so to my observation here. So I don't know. I mean, the notion of it sounds interesting enough. The practicality of it might be very different. I mean, we're talking here now about personalities and, who you can get on with and who you can actually, spend time with, and, how that actually ends up working. So I think there's a lot more in terms of the nuances of it that might create challenge, but that's just sort of one singular takeaway here.
And that's where you wonder how we can get creative. Like the housing market with so much verticals and so much derivatives and so much ways to leverage. Is there, would the Black Opportunity Fund call those types of conferences where we can bring families together and say, like, hey, let's get creative about those that are renting in the room with those that are owning in the room, to figure out how we can help more people get ownership, just so we can have those conversations. Maybe it's already on the agenda to have those, but I'm curious how we can just start to strategize around it and actually get some ideas on the table.
What's a great, sorry, Ray, just to cut you for a second. Well, what's a great option is multiplexes, where there are different levels. So the ground floor is one person, the second floor is a different person, and the basement is a third. So 3 different people, 3 separate living spaces, but it's one house, one property.
So it's interesting that you bring that up, because I think most of you are probably aware of Dr. Kofi Hope.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Yes.
So Kofi and his partner Zara Ibrahim, they are working with the School of Cities at the University of Toronto, and they actually put in Black folks, as developers of 4plexes and 6plexes, and through a program to help them undertake exactly that, right?
Yeah.
So Roger, what you're just talking about, and Ryan, what you're talking about, that's one approach that's taking place that might be helpful along the way, but it's early stages. Look, I will state again, where housing is concerned, there is no one solution. There has to be a wide variety of solutions, and it requires actually pretty much a whole of community. And by that, I mean everyone within the housing ecosystem. So you're talking about local authorities and municipalities as it speaks to zoning and non-permissioning. You're talking about those who are financing it. You know, you're talking about everyone involved in the housing ecosystem having to participate. More specifically, in response to your question, Ryan, I would say that, you know, Black Opportunity Fund looks at all times to undertake convening on topics that are important to community, but ultimately it is not us doing the work from that perspective. It's actually bringing in the people who have the knowledge and finding out how do we support them towards the end goal.
Right.
Got it. All right. Some comments. I know, Roger, you've got to jump off. So any final comments? There's a comment here from Ray McMillan. Says, Roger, multi-generational ownership is definitely the way to do it. Our clients who have done that have significantly increased their net worth. I grew up in a multi-generation
home. Is he frozen?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh no.
Okay, now we're back.
Oh, you good?
Yeah.
Okay, we got you back.
Yeah, Sarita Powell says
Wait, we missed the.
No, I'll get to that. There's a certain reason why I'm doing this. So Sarita Powell says that's how we lived in Jamaica, in the rural area. But don't forget, some people migrate alone. However, I think that in that case, more people can get together as friends, investors, and share space to reduce the costs. Of Tim Frey, Office of Tim Frey says, I have a South Asian client with 5 building plans in Ontario with around 746 units. He wants to partner and provide a percentage of the units for our Black community. Is there any program to support this?
That's interesting. The only other comment I'd make to just on top of the different solutions is migration within Canada, because there are more affordable homes, especially if you have a remote job. If you have a remote job, you don't need to be paying high rent in GTA or all that. You could live in New Brunswick, not as nice. It depends on what you like, right? So if your lifestyle fits, exactly. If your lifestyle fits PEI, New Brunswick, Newfoundland, Labrador, it is much cheaper to live out that side. It's not as cheap anymore in Halifax.
Yeah, but Roger, you know, I don't think you're gonna find any planting in New Brunswick, you know.
We gotta bring it there. Hey. But isn't there a restaurant out in New Brunswick, Roger?
There are several
that we highlighted
in New Brunswick, in Prince Edward Island. I think there's about 7 or 8 for such a small space. So it's not that it might be a little bit more expensive, and then that speaks to the agricultural side of having indoor farms, right, and growing the crops that you want to see. So that's another versus always shipping and importing stuff from the motherland and from the Caribbean. So there's a couple different ideas, and there are many ways to skin the cat. So to your point, Ray, I have to jump. I do have a meeting at 10:30, but I was happy to spend some time here and continue that amazing work at BOF. It's fantastic what you guys are doing.
Thank you, Roger.
Thank you, Roger, for helping make the conversation great. And we got one more question, and we'll let Ray go. And again, appreciate your time to spend with us today. The McMillan Group goes, does the BOF have any intention to get involved in opportunity zones in Canadian cities? And if yes, can you share the approach?
Well, what I'll say is that right now, the only thing that we have a focus on is getting the housing fund launched. And so, you know, to my earlier point about how do you actually, as an ant, eat the elephant, one bite at a time. And so we are a 4-year-old organization, right? That's the reality. We are ensuring that we're building a fundamental base in a sound fashion. And so there's only so much that we can do with a small staff. And so one step at a time, right? I'm not saying that this is something that we have in mind, but I'm not saying that's something that necessarily we would not even give consideration to either. I'm just simply saying that we have specific plans right now that we are undertaking. and we need to execute those in a fashion that reflects very well on what we not only say, but what we do. And so that's kind of where we are right now.
Ryan, any final comments? Because this has been epic.
Absolutely. I just want to say thank you again for taking the time. I know you definitely get to follow the journey, whether it's the food porn on Facebook or you're like opening up schools and wings of universities. So yeah. It's just an honor to be able to talk with you and also get a peek behind, I would say, behind the scenes of how these things come to be and how they develop. These are things that we, especially myself as an organizational leader, use as inspiration and the North Star, being able to be part of infrastructure that I would say is like top tier with BOF and learning from that. So not just hearing about good governance, but trying to put that into our own organizations, but then connecting with good governance so that we have the mentor and the example. I think that could be a blueprint that we definitely share broader in the community to say like, hey, whoever is doing it best, let's connect and learn from that. So I just want to say thank you for your time and having that opportunity for us as well.
Pleasure.
And one last thing I will add. And so Ray, what would be your call to action to us, people watching this, especially to Black Canadians and maybe Blacks around the world?
A call to action is, I think, greater engagement. One of my biggest issues is that I think people love to complain. I think that's easy enough to do. But when it comes to actually taking action, stepping into the fray and doing, you see, I think, less of that. And I'm not sitting here just, throwing shade at anyone in particular. I'm just simply saying that let's see more people participate and let's see more action in terms of the engagement. There are plenty of organizations out there for people to get engaged with to help change the narrative, help change the outcomes. Sitting complaining about our situations actually helps no one. But doing something, even when it means moving the needle ever so slightly, actually is the way to move ahead.
I think those are powerful words to end up with. If you want to touch base with Ray, the best way is LinkedIn. So I shared it on the screen and most of the platforms that people are watching on. If you want to find out more information about the Black Opportunity Fund, I put it up earlier. I put .com. It's actually .ca, their address, but I sent that update to everybody. And I want to say, Ray, again, thank you for you. Really, thank you for you. I don't see you a lot, but when I do, even if it's digital wise, you stretch me in a good way.
You're more than welcome. Thank you for having me.
Well, no problem. And as always, you're, as they say, well done, good and humble, and foodie servant.
But we have to at least have, whether it's a bi-yearly or yearly check-in on how retirement is actually going. So we'll follow the journey and see like what stage you've gotten to.
Boy. And again, if I'm saying this on behalf of, I'm sure myself, Ryan, and Roger's not with us, if there's anything that we can potentially help with, please ask.
Appreciate that.
Yes.
All right. So as always, don't just manage your time, manage your energy, and remember to give yourself grace and keep your other half happy.
Yes. This much I know.
All right. Take care, my brother. Keep the faith.
All right, guys. Thanks so much for the time.
My
Appreciate
pleasure.
it.
All right. That was epic.
Yeah.
You see what happens?
Disappoints.
Well, you see what happens when you stick around for a whole show?
Right. Yes.
And on a Friday. Thank you, Cher. Thank you.
I was gonna say thank you.
Thank you, Cher. So anything you want to reflect on over the last, it's almost hour and a half.
Well, it's interesting to see the different spaces that the Black Opportunity Fund leans into. I remember we had Craig on with the Walmarts about their health initiative, and then this one's more about housing and also like with economics. So getting, I would say, more of the community to be part of these conversations would be key so that as it's being developed, like be part of the design. We shouldn't just be sitting back, like he was saying, on the sidelines, just, shouting our observations of what's happening. Like, no, let's get down there and be part of the strategy. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this develops and how we can support and be part of it.
Yeah, this was a really good conversation.
Anything that stuck out for you?
For me, it was like a masterclass, especially when you broke down the housing piece.
Yo, that clip, I'm telling you. Yeah, that.
Like and it is said that for people to go from the low class, the poor class to the middle class is housing, having a home, and to go from middle class to upper class, owner of stocks.
Okay.
But the housing piece, and you notice how I use the word leverage.
Right. Well, and that's where, as a collective community, if we know we need to help more of us get into housing, then I feel we can strategize about, okay, who currently owns and who's renting, and what can be done to start taking those bites, one at a time, a couple at a time, just figuring out how to get more people into that space so that they can start leveraging and, like you said, get into stock ownership, get into investing. So yeah, I feel like that's a great priority to target.
Some other people I want to shout out who's like the conversation on Facebook: Marcia Darby, Christy White. We also had Andrea Bryan. Oh my gosh, I haven't heard that. And Cindy Ann Williams. Wonderful.
Yes. Shout out to Brampton.
Northwest Territories.
Right.
Northwest Territories. So yeah, family, thank you for hanging. This was and it took me a few weeks to get a hold of it, because again, follow him on LinkedIn. He doesn't show the stuff for the cooking, but all the other stuff, he is like, he's at 130 speed, like you said. So we want him to slow down, but he ain't gonna be done for a long time.
Well, when he breaks down the experience, it's like you can't let that experience just go into the nights and into the sunset. It's
like I said, the way he broke down that housing process, wow, that was like going, whoa. Like, yeah, I'm sure,
and to be the person that built it, like helped to structure it, man, that type of expertise, that IP,
Ray's a bad. Well, then we know two Rays are bad men. They're bad men. All right. So what's up for the rest of the weekend?
Yes. So shout out to David Green. Oh, he's doing I think it's AGM or gala tomorrow that he asked me to keynote. So yes, I'll put on my cap and gown to head to a gala.
Got that yet.
I still am waiting. Dr. Tachi
and Divine Rights.
Yes, we're waiting for it. But yeah, so keynoting that. But we always do our Saturday morning youth entrepreneur program with Delta. So actually, we're trying to figure out how to turn this into a Saturday school where we can teach entrepreneurship ongoing, so all year round, Saturday from like 10 to 12. So it will start that conversation about the Saturday school used to exist and now it doesn't. How do we bring something like that back? So we've been brainstorming what to do.
That's interesting, because in other cultures they have their Saturday schools
and after school too, after school. So we have to start.
They spend time to teach their own from their own.
Exactly. So we can definitely lean into that. So yeah, that's been on my mind. And as like we have 2 weeks, well, I'll say less than 2 weeks till the conference. So
yeah,
those that will be there.
I gotta get a room. Yeah, I gotta get a room. Yeah.
Forward to that.
Or I'll be sleeping in the car. Maybe I'll do the morning vibe from my car. Wake up in the morning. Oh, click. Click. And I would be remorse. There is contact information for Buy Blacks. So yes. Roger and Camille, his beautiful wife, buyblacks.com. There's the contact information for Buy Blacks. There is contact information for Ryan. And there's contact information for myself. What else do we want to put up there? Oh, you can watch replays of this conversation there. So this weekend on tomorrow, primetime Saturday with Aisha K. Staggers and Lala, we'll get to see what they're thinking about the presidential race, because they said during the last debate, they thought that Ms. Harris is going to win. It don't look. It's very close. It's very close.
It's eerily close. Like you would think she'd be pulling because she's raised over like $1 billion.
Yeah,
the momentum was there.
But you know what I'm hearing? The two biggest pushbacks. I listened to NPR this morning. They about 6 months ago surveyed or had a group of 12 people called double haters. And what they meant by that were the double haters where they didn't like Biden and they didn't like 45.
Okay, neither option.
But now they went back to them. 5 of them are for Harris, 4 of them are for 45. And the biggest criticism that a lot of people had with Ms. Harris is we really don't know her economic plan.
Okay.
Which I'm going, but has she, and she just maybe they're not pushing it out enough for people to know what it is. And then a number of them, because she's a woman. Still, America's in the mindset they don't.
Cold-blooded.
One of them said, "Oh, she'll be too emotional." And I go, compared to 45,
right?
Too emotional.
Jeez.
But so it's going to be very interesting tomorrow night to get, and we'll probably have Cesar on Black Canada talking on Sunday, and then Monday morning we have Carolyn Nicole back, and she's going to be specifically talking about men's health.
Okay. Solid.
Men's health. And then Tuesday night on the Dr. Vibe show, we're going to be starting a series of conversations. I have formed a collaboration with a gentleman who's a Black male psychotherapist in the U.S., and we're going to be doing a number of conversations monthly. And I think our first one is about, you know what? Let me see if I can find it real quick, because it's when I shared it with someone yesterday, they go, "You're going in." I said, "Yep, we're going in.
Yeah.
We're going in." Let me see if I can find it really quick. We are going to be talking about the difficulty of unlocking joy for Black men.
Okay.
So we are going in on that. So yes, I'm going to be doing a live conversation every day from now till Tuesday.
Okay. And what time is that? Would that be happening?
The one on Tuesday will be 9 p.m. I'm just waiting to get his bio, and I'll post it on all the platforms for 9 p.m. on Tuesday. So, and the weather's 8. Is Detailing Night still operating? Because you got warm weather until Tuesday.
20 degrees is happening this weekend. Listen, sun is shining.
I tell you.
It's not slow. We're hoping to get at least November. Usually we go mid-December, but the mornings are crisp.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, so after mornings we're in the turtlenecks, but after we're in t-shirts.
I got up this morning and the car was frost. There was frost on the wheels. I turned it on, had the defroster on for about 3-4 minutes. Said it's coming, but it is nice out there. So everybody, thank you for taking the time. I'm speaking that Ray Williams and Ray McMillan have a conversation. I think that would be, I would love to be at the table for that. That would be a good conversation.
Yeah, I like that.
That would be very powerful. All right. So everybody, live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Sometimes you have to get small to get stronger. Block assumptions and aim bigger, aim better, aim higher and wider. Love, faith, and respect. And don't just manage your time, manage your energy. And remember to give yourselves grace. Man, it's been a while since I've done a live too. It was like over a week. Yeah, it's been a week. It's a long weekend and all those things. All right. All right. So God bless. Peace, y'all. Keep the faith. You know what? I forgot to do this. Subscribe. I wanted to get ready to do Ray Williams today, so I didn't want to hold back the time. But few last things. Subscribe to the Dr. Vibe Show on YouTube and hit the notification button. We're finally past 1,570 subscribers. Like the Dr. Vibe Show on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. To advertise your business, product, or service, please email me, dr.vibe at the drvibeshow.com. Join the Discord group. Email me at the email address. And, of course, we can never forget Dr. Tachi and Indie Soup Media, which is now at, I think, almost 19,000 subscribers. You'll also check it out. Whole pile of content creators, myself being one of them, has, I think, 3 or 4 conversations a week, 2 times a week. The Morning Vibe edited versions are on there. So now we're done. All right. God bless. Peace, well, keep the faith, and walk good. We'll see you if you're just morning vibing on Monday. Bye.